single day I'm gonna make something great. That's my way. Every single day.
Deep work. Professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. It entails avoiding distraction and focusing intently for extended periods of time. In order to learn quickly and effectively, we need deep work. Shallow work. Non-cognitively demanding logistical style tasks often performed while distracted. These efforts tend to not create much new value into the world and are easy to replicate.
Simply put, deep work allows us to focus on a given task without being distracted. In an information age where new researches and technologies are being introduced every single day, we need to update our knowledge and skills accordingly. Deep work allows us to focus in a distracted world. Learning with intense concentration and focus makes us to use only a single neural circuit, an isolated neural circuit. Meanwhile, when we are distracted, we are using more than one circuit and we are activating those neural circuits haphazardly. When we are only focused on one task, we stimulate our oligodendrocytes to produce myelin sheath. Myelin sheath, as the sheet might give you an idea, that it's the covering, it's the fatty layer of covering, just like you have a copper wire which is basically covered. So why do we need that covering? We need that covering to reduce the heat losses in order to transmit information efficiently and quickly and fastly. And efficiently, that's basically fast, right? That's another way of fast, because it's fast and quick. So when you focus, you're actually stimulating your myelin production, and myelin sheath production continues. So it's not something that just like stops, that continues. Okay, so when we are switching between tasks, what we are doing is we think that we are dividing our attention, or basically checking our email after every 10 minutes or after every 15 minutes, or when you're tired. So let's look at our Twitter feed, or let's tweet something after 15 minutes or after 20 minutes. Might seem an innocent idea, but when it comes to understanding what really happens in your brain, it's kind of harmful for your work, because when you are switching between tasks, a portion of your attention, which is the attention residue, remains on hooked to the task at hand. The task that you did before you switched. Part of your attention is going to remain to that, like it's going to be left behind, and that is going to really impact your efficiency, your productivity, and also it's going to decrease the amount of time that is required to complete a task. So before multitasking, you're not really multitasking, because what you're doing is you're not really using your brain. You're sort of like dividing your brain parts. It's not that your brain is one part of the brain is working to this task, one part of the brain is working on this task. What happens is your brain switches between tasks, and when your brain switches between tasks, it cannot really attend to a single work, as a single thing that you're doing at hand, and sort of, it's a big, like, one task and then another task, sort of haphazard, and it's not really focused, right? And it decreases your productivity, decreases any kind of deep thinking, because deep thinking is about it's focusing and then thinking about that, and it's about that. So it's not like, like switching one thing to another thing and reducing your productivity with that. Okay, so flow state. Cal Newport also mentions its flow state, this book by an author that I cannot pronounce, so I'm not going to pronounce it. So flow state is basically like flow, it's like floating. So basically when it comes to floating, it means that you are so deeply engaged and deeply involved at the task at hand, with the task at hand, that you like floating. that your sense of time seems irrelevant at that time. You don't really care what's the time, and you're just floating with it, and you're so deeply involved with the task at hand. And yes, so there are also types of deep work that he mentions, Paul Newport mentions, so that we can sort of, if you want to do deep work, we can say that we can choose from the different types of deep work. So what is monastic? Monastic deep work is a work in which you have like your full concentration and full like focus to that deep work. You're just secluded and you're just isolated, and that is monastic. It's you just eliminate all shallow work from your life. There's nothing shallow about it. It's just monastic. Okay, there's another one that is bimodal. In bimodal, you divide the weeks, you divide the seasons. For example, my summer season, I'm going to be in like the deep work, so I'm going to go into like an isolated hermit sort of state, and I am going to disengage like that sort of. This is like my summer is going to be in the deep work, and my winters are going to be in like Himalayas and all. So that's bimodal. So okay, now rhythmic. Rhythmic is more like attuned to our schedule, because it's more like I am going to dedicate certain hours of my time, of my day, to deep work. For example, in the day I can schedule 2 or 3 hours for deep work, and the rest of the day it would be more like shallow, right? Journalistic work is more like at an hour, like at the hour. It's not like scheduling anything, but it's like when you get the time, you get into it deeper, which is the reason why it's called journalistic, because journalists are trained to just write at that like rapidly and to switch between tasks. They can do that because I think they're trained. Call Newport suggests that they're trained for that. They can just write it like that. They can easily get into that zone. On the other hand, when it comes to us people, us mortals, we cannot really switch between deep work and shallow work like that. We need to have rituals, and we need to have processes. We need to have a specific location in which we get into this sort of deep work. So what does Carl Newport suggest? He says that, have a location, specify location, and then specify your rules. For example, I'm not going to use my internet in my deep work setting, so that's another thing. And then have a ritual, like I'm going to for example, start my deep work sessions with a coffee, with my food access, and how do you measure how many, what's the standard of your deep work? How do you measure, is it working, or are you productive or not? Then how many pages you wrote, or how many number of pages you read, or the drafts that you produce, whatever metric you want to, but establish that and experiment with your deep work sessions and all. And ritual sort of makes us more we are autopilots most of the time. Our bodies just need these things. We wake up, and then we have our phones, and then we have this schedule around in a head, right? So we basically function according to those habits. We sort of conserve energy, and we only function according to those habits. So we need to understand that our willpower, I forgot to mention this, is very limited. So whatever willpower we have, we need to train it by focusing on a habit and one habit at a time. And then the more you exercise your willpower by forming habits, the more likely you're going to increase it like a muscle. Okay. So in time blocking, what you actually do is on the left hand side or corner of your page, what you do is you write the time, the hours of the day, right? First and foremost, you need to know that how many hours are you going to spend on working, right? So for example, it's 7 and 8 hours, right? So how would you divide the number of hours between the times of the day, from 3 to 4 I'm going to do this, from 4 to 5 I'm going to do this, and the blocks will be of 30 minutes, right? So you can redraw it, you can erase some blocks. See, the idea behind time blocking is not to be rigid about it and to just have this sort of time scheduling that you cannot like redraw it and you just have to follow it like anything. You don't have to follow it like that. What you need to do instead is the most important thing is you need to know what are you doing with your time. You need to ask yourself, you need to have this habit of asking yourself every single day, every single minute or second of your day, that what am I doing? Like, does that make any sense? What I'm doing right now, does that make any sense? And that's the most important question that you need to ask yourself. So first and foremost, what you need to ask yourself is, what's the most important thing to you? And what is the most important factor that will contribute to your success and happiness in your professional and your personal life? And after that, you can justify the use of social media, Facebook, Instagram. Does that really contribute to anything in your life? Carl Newport says that the kind of connection, the kind of the reason that we are really using social media is because we really need to connect with our friends. We need to catch up on people that we lost in childhood or school, or we need to keep ourselves updated about things that are happening. So what Carl Newport suggests that just have a 30 days interval in which you're not using any social media app, and then ask yourself after that 30 day schedule, that does that really change anything, or did your friends miss you, or did you were you better before, or were you better after? Does that really produce any tangible difference in your life? And if it does, then go back to social media. If it does not, then leave it for better. Don't deactivate in those 30 days, but just not be online. And there's another strategy, that when you are actually checking out internet, what you're going to do is don't just prioritize. Like, if you want to use it for a specific time and mention that time. And also, when you're using a laptop or computer, you have to note down on your notepad the time that you're gonna use the internet in that time, and just in that time, and just resist it. And that's the most difficult thing. But as you wean your attention off all these distractions, you will learn to be more happy and fulfilled, in the sense that you will pay attention on those things that are highly productive for you. Like, you will pay attention to those goals that you always wanted to achieve. I had like this really bad stalking addiction, and the moment I decided like to wean myself off social media and everything, I couldn't do it. I kind of realized that it was 4 hours that I was spending my time on social media, 4 whole hours, and I think at that time it was so impossible to just leave everything behind. Even now, I feel like sometimes the pull of social media is quite a lot, but it's not that bad. It's not 4 hours, obviously. It's 5 minutes, sometimes 10. But I think it's not that bad for me, at least. So what I do is I have uninstalled any like social media app, and my phone is on focus mode. So even my WhatsApp is blocked, so I can like open it for like 5 minutes, and then there's a timer. Oh, you have opened it for 5 minutes, now it's blocked. So do you want to use it? So it's like I'm more mindful of my usage. So yeah, especially WhatsApp distracts me like anything. Emails is not a big thing for me, but WhatsApp is a huge thing for me. Sometimes it comes up and people just come up, and like it's like I have to answer them, and it distracts you. So I block notifications from the app so that I'm not distracted from that app. So it happens in my phone. There is a feature of focus mode, so you can also block notifications from apps that you think it distracts you when you're doing something, and then something pop up come up, and you can do it as well. But the thing that you need to do is be mindful of your distractions and of the things that are really, taking away all the time and attention, because these apps are really taking the same amount of attention. And there's an 80 to 20% rule that it's not just that it applies to this thing, it applies to everything. You Google it, 80-20 rule, you will see a lot of results. And the 80-20% rule is basically 80% of the profits comes from 20% of the workers, 80% of your paper comes from 20% of the slavers, so on and so forth. I don't know how credible this 80 to 20% rule is, but if you really look at your papers and stuff, I feel like there is a connection, that there are certain topics that are really yes, this is really important. I think there's so many topics that are less important, and that happens if you really see. And okay, so I mentioned everything almost. Not everything, I would say. There's this thing that he does not really recommend open offices, because you feel, obviously, because you're distracted, and that's not the way you do deep work. So he is talking about his own university, MIT, and he's talking about that they has to be, I think, from Second World War. I think before Second World War, there has to be there used to be a building in which there were really different departments in some one building. Nowadays we have different departments are housed in different buildings, but at that time in MIT there were so many departments, wide variety of departments in the same building. So because of that sort of diversity and variety, and there used to be a lot of innovation because of that variety. They used to visit and talk, and because of that sort of talking and having that connection from different departments, having that sort of connection, that made innovations possible. So he's saying that yes, that was possible, certainly, but deep work is deep work, and it cannot happen with people. But he also mentions collaborative work, that you can do with another person. Two people can do collaborative work, especially in when you're doing inventions and innovations. You can do collaborative work because the other one person can push the other person. And I think pretty much I talked about that you have to wean yourself from social media. I talked about I didn't mention productive meditation. Productive meditation is when you're walking, you're jogging, or you're anything like washing, for example, brushing your teeth. And in those times when you could easily waste those times, you could use it to think about some problems, one focused problem. It's just like mindfulness meditation, but exactly like in mindfulness, you're just going back to the topic that the problem that you wanted to talk about. You just go back to that problem, and you start thinking. And he also mentions this one thing, that it's easy for your brain to just start looping, which is whatever you know about the subject, you start thinking along the same lines. But what he says is avoid thinking avoid thinking about the subject, about the things that you already know about the topic. Try to just go with try to avoid that, and try to think about new and diverse ideas about that subject that you've been in your mind, that the problem that you have in your mind, new ways, diverse ways. And he uses walks, that he walks every single morning, and he uses those walks as meditation. And our brain tends to avoid thinking and all that because it has to conserve energy. So it's sort of um, don't want to think that much. It makes sense because our brain has 21% of a cardiac output. Cardiac output is the volume of blood which is pumped out of the heart. So it's a lot when in terms of its size. Brain does not have a lot of in terms of its size, it's not that much, but in terms of its blood supply, it's a lot. So a lot of blood and glucose is required for your mental activity. So it makes sense that your brain needs to want to reduce the stress and does not want to think about complex problems, because that will lead to more energy being consumed.